You're here because you know something. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there.
Don't worry, don't be afraid, ever. This is just a rhyme.
I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up vibrations.
On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York. While in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the budget analyst office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her. And her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about...
His head could be seen to move violently forward.
And...
They took the babies out of the incubators.
And...
Mobile production facilities.
And...
The rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit paranoid tinfoil dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, You will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever. This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, SEC, NSM, White House, NIST, and the 9/11 Commission. Because ignorance is strength.
So, welcome back to Good Vibrations, Max Igan.
Thank you, Mark. Nice to be back on again, brother.
Good to have you here. So, we're talking about 9/11 as we approach the 15th anniversary of what we said last time was a world-changing event by anyone's standards. And we spoke with Ian Crane about his reflections on the legacy of that event, what it left behind in the world. And I want to get your perspectives on this today. And I've heard you say before that prior to 9/11, you were already someone that realised that the world is nothing like we're told it was. And I wonder how much of a shock that event was to you. Was it just a confirmation of things that you already knew, or did it really shake your world in the same way that it did so many other people?
Well, yeah, it did. I mean, it was confirmation of things that I knew, and it was something that I expected. And when it happened, it was like an aha moment. And there was in a way, there was even a certain element of excitement in there because I was in the whole spy novel version of looking at things, this whole conspiracy culture, and we're waiting for this big event, and aha, here it comes. But then it was also a profound wake up because, oh my God, this isn't just a novel. This isn't just an interesting story. This isn't just a conspiracy that's going on behind the scenes. This is really, really serious. And we've been waiting for this big event, and now it's here. It was like my world kind of, I don't know, it turned backwards or upside down. It's like I walked out of the light into the dark or out of the dark into the light or both at the same time. It was like, it's hard to explain. It's like I entered into an anti-world or something, but I kind of, it was a confirmation, and it was exciting, but it was also profoundly disturbing and profoundly awakening, and a deep, deep realization that all this stuff that I've been looking at for my life, all this hobby that I've had of looking at the system to try to figure out where all the corruption is and what's really going on here. This is actually serious. This is a really, really serious thing. And this big event is a serious thing. And it really made me think that, maybe I should have been taking this more seriously. Maybe I should have been speaking out about this years ago. Maybe I shouldn't have just been looking at it as a conspiratorial sort of a culture and reading the magazines and stuff. Maybe I really should do something about this. So it was a profoundly life-changing moment for me because it showed me the value of all the stuff that I'd done. It showed me the purpose of my life as well, how my life had been constructed for me to be able to live on the outside of society and yet gather all this knowledge. And here's the catalytic event that now it's caused me to realize that I need to put all of that knowledge actually into action, and that I'd had this life for a reason. I'd gathered this knowledge for a reason, and I'd been put on this path for a reason. And it was like I found my true path. And it was a profound moment, and it still is. And 9/11 is such a cohesive moment, and it is a moment that still affects us today. It will never be old news. 9/11 will never be old news, not while the war on terror continues to rage, not while we are still having our rights taken away from us in Western countries, because all of this is riding on the back of 9/11. And if that event is reinvestigated and exposed properly, we may actually get our world back. We may be able to roll back some of this stuff and realize that we've been played for the last 17 years or 16 years. So it is a huge event, and it was life-changing for me.
Right. Yeah, as you say, it's the point at which all this information stops being a hobby and you realise it's time to get serious. This is a serious matter, no more messing about. And I think 9/11 is one of those events where everyone remembers where they were when they heard the news. People say the same thing about the JFK assassination back in the day, and even when Elvis died. But I think anyone that was around in 2001 can remember where they were. And myself, I was up in remotest North Scotland on holiday, just in this tiny little village on the north coast of Scotland. Beautiful weather, miles away from any kind of civilization. And my mum called me on my mobile phone, very dodgy signal, but I could hear she was hysterical on the other end of the phone, and she said, "My God, something's happening, America's under attack, I don't know what's going on." So I got to the nearest TV set back at this bed and breakfast we were staying at, and there it is unfolding on the BBC News. And I was with my wife at the time, and we ended up having an argument about it because she said, "Your mum shouldn't have told you about this because it's going to ruin the holiday." And I said, "Well, this is something I need to know about." And so it got into a big argument. So even then it was being divisive and causing disarray, right from the off. That's my own personal recollection of when I first heard the news. So I'm sure you've got similar memories of where you were and what the circumstances were when you heard the news break.
Yeah, I was in Bundaberg, Queensland. I was actually chatting with some people in New York at the time when it happened, and I'd just kind of gone away from the television, or gone away from the computer, and sort of had a shower and a couple of things, come back, and I saw it unfolding on the television. The television was on with the sound down, and I just saw it and thought, it was about 11 o'clock at night, or 10 o'clock or 12 o'clock, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't know, it was very late at night. I was in Queensland, Australia. And I ended up staying up all night and watching the whole thing unfold on the television. And it was profound, absolutely profound. But, Bundaberg, Queensland, that's where I was, just in the lower part of mid-Queensland,
Right.
And it was a profound moment for me.
Yeah. And I mentioned in my chat with Ian the other day that I, sadly, to my shame, fell for the official story, hook, line and sinker, for the first few years. It wasn't until probably the mid-2000s that I started to question the narrative. I knew no better back in 2001. And I think that's probably a story that a lot of people can relate to that are listening to this. There was no kind of conspiracy culture back then. The internet was still very much in its infancy. You didn't have people sharing YouTube videos and blog postings the minute an event goes down like they do now. So back in 2001, there were very few people that were on this path. And I think 9/11 very much served as a catalyst to get a lot of people into this idea of questioning the official story of things and seeking truth in everything. So it's a double-edged sword. It caused absolute mayhem and devastation in the world, and we're still feeling the ripples today and will for a very long time. The world literally changed forever. But at the same time, it got a lot of people on board and woke them up who may not have done if it hadn't been for this event.
Yeah, it did, but also there's another way of looking at it. I think with the advent of the internet, the way it's all happened. 9/11 was so obviously staged. Why did they do it so sloppily, Mark? You got to question that. Why was it so sloppy? And then the internet's here, and then you got the Alex Joneses and all the people out there screaming all this fear, fear, fear. And now they've got tabs on everybody who hasn't been programmed properly. Now they've got tabs on all the activists. They've got tabs on everybody who can see through the government plan through 9/11. And it's divided a lot of the society because there's a lot of people who simply won't believe it, but there's a lot of people who do. And it's created a huge activist community, and it's given the powers that believe they be tabs on where they all are. They know where all the activists are now through the internet and through everything that we've done. So, it's a kind of a double-edged sword for us as well. It has served to wake people up, but it's also served to provide government with the information on who all the awake people are and where they are. And they can control the media, so they're able to spin things any way they want. Let's face it, the media can make up any story it wants. They could make up a story that Boston had been attacked by whales and people would probably believe it, It's incredible. So
this leads me on to the observation that, to me, most of the time that I think about it, it's incredible that in 2016 there are still people in the world who accept the official version of what went down on 9/11, because when you've spent a number of years looking at it and when you associate with a whole bunch of other people who have, it just becomes ridiculous, the notion that things could possibly have happened the way we were told by the mainstream news. But you have to bear in mind that if you only move in social circles with other truth seekers, it can skew your perceptions of what people are thinking and feeling out there in the wider world. So sometimes you have to kind of break out of that and maybe go into a bar or a cafe or something, or walk down the average street and just listen to what people are saying and just try and get into their mindset to get an appreciation of what the general population are thinking. I think when we only associate with friends who are on the same path as us, it can make you think, yeah, everyone now knows 9/11 was bullshit, and everyone is on the path to uncovering truth. So you can definitely get things skewed and twisted in that way, I feel.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And many people do. And something that I do when I travel around is I do exactly that. I talk to people on the street. Cab drivers are a really good marker, because cab drivers talk to everybody. So you start talking to a cab driver and asking what the social situation's like and what the political situation's like, and they start spreading information. Just ask a political question. Just ask a pointed question. Let them go. They'll love to talk to you. And they'll tell you what's going on with the local laws and the local people and all this sort of stuff. And I'm finding that when I do this sort of stuff, I'm getting more and more wakefulness every year that I go travelling. people are more and more awake. When I was in Holland a few months ago, when I saw you there, actually, I was speaking to cab drivers there, and they were very, very much more awake than what they were the year before. So this is one of the things that I gauge is, people shop counters, check out operators and cab drivers and people like this, talk to them, and you get a pretty good overview of what the public opinion is. And I'm seeing very positive growth in the wakefulness of people, actually. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. And that's funny to me because my day job, the one that I do to pay the bills and keep a roof over my head, is actually as a cab driver. So I'm not your average cab driver. So most of these guys will be talking about football and, what was on TV last night and politics. But I'm the sort of guy that will engineer a conversation about chemtrails and fracking and try and get the punters to talk about that. So the conversation you get in a car with me is not your average conversation, but that's just me. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's not a lot of money in this Truth in Lark. So I kind of have to do that to pay the bills.
Yeah, it's very hard, mate. There isn't a lot of money in this at all. I absolutely struggle to get by. That's why I live in the third world. So, I mean, and I do what I do. I've got so much going on that, I do it full time because it just has to be done. It just has to be done. People have to be out there doing this, and we have to be getting the word out, and we can't drop the torch. So, but hey, that's just the way it is. It's not a lifestyle, that's for sure. This freedom activism, it certainly isn't a lifestyle choice.
And what's incredible to me is people think that you do it for the money. I actually get that. I've got my book out and I've been touring to promote my book, doing conferences and talks and stuff. And I've had comments on Facebook threads and YouTube saying, "Oh, you're just doing it for the money. That's the only reason you're in this game." Look at the bullshit we have to put up with, and look at the risks we take. Why would anyone do that just for the money? Come on now.
Well, exactly. I mean, I get that all the time. Oh, you travel to all these exotic locations. How do you afford to do that? Well, the speaking events fly me there, and I usually do the events for no pay. So, sure, I go to all these exotic places, and I sit in a hotel with no food and no money, and go home with no food and no money. And this is why I'm 6'1" and weigh 9 stone. So, I have 4 meals a week. So people can say what they want, but there is not a lot of money in this. Sure, I get to travel a lot. But there's no enjoyment in that. I've been a musician my entire life. I've spent my entire life traveling around the world. Do people really seriously think I enjoy traveling? I mean, but anyway, off topic.
Indeed. So there's so many theories about the specifics of what happened on that day, 9/11, from the directed energy weapons theory to the idea that the planes were actually holograms. It seems everyone's got a different theory on how the thing was pulled off. Have you got any perspectives on the nuts and bolts of how it was done, or is the jury still out on all of that yourself? And how important do you think it is to figure out the specific tactics that were used that day? Is it more important to reflect on what the event was designed to usher in and the legacy that it's left behind than to understand the minutiae of it, or is that an important factor to you?
Look, eventually it's an important factor to know how it was all done, but for the moment, I think it's a detail. I think it's just something that causes infighting. You've got a lot of people screaming out, this was an inside job, this was done by the government, and yet they're all arguing about how it was done, and so there's no cohesive push to just call the government out. I know it was done with thermite, I know it was done with directed energy, I know it was done with this, I know it was done with that. It's an argument that it's a detail. We'll figure that out later. We'll figure out who did it and how it was done once we've opened up the investigation. But we need to unite and realise that however it was done, it wasn't done by 19 Arabs with hijackers and 2 planes hitting 2 buildings. There's no way that's how it was done.
Sure.
Whether the planes hit the buildings, whether it was holograms, whatever, we'll figure this out. But there's no way 2 buildings can collapse like that. There's no way it can just dissolve into dust and leave no debris. There's no way any of this can happen, and there's no way this was done by a guy in a cave on a dialysis machine. It's just not possible. So these things are details. People get too bogged down in the details. We need to have a major thrust for the major event to figure out what the details are, So,
sure.
My jury's out. I mean, I've got certain perspectives that I lean towards, but I prefer not to put them out there because that might influence someone else into just getting into an argument of infighting. And to me, like I said, it's a detail at the moment,
Right. And there's so much evidence in terms of symbolism that was planted into movies and cartoons and music videos and stuff. This is all what I get into in my talks, and I mention it in my book. Predictive programming and all these elements of what was to come to pass on 9/11 that you could see in movies in the decades leading up to 2001. So not even just a few years before, but you can go back to the 1980s, the 1970s, and you can see depictions of what was going to happen. So it certainly gives an indication that this event was planned for decades in advance. And, you know, there's a theory that the World Trade Center towers, when they were constructed in the 1960s, they were constructed with the specific purpose of being brought down 35 years later. It was all in the plan. So this was a much planned for event. It was very, very important and very key to the Dark Controllers to pull this one off. It seems to stand head and shoulders above all other events, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it was planned long, long ago. I mean, even 9/11, it's such a significant date. And the towers, I believe, they may have even put explosive in the concrete. I mean, I don't know. They came down so cleanly and there's no debris. I mean, these buildings were made to be destroyed. I really do believe that to be a very, very real possibility. So, yeah, I mean, and the symbolism is everywhere. And it was through so many movies, as you say, cartoons, music videos, The Simpsons, everything you can think of depicted this event. And, you know, the symbolism on the day, what you've got a Flight 11 hitting, with crewed by a crew of 11, hitting an 11-shaped building at, 9 minutes to 11 or 8 minutes to 11 or 11 minutes to 9 on 9/11. I mean, no symbolism there, is there, you know? How many 11s can we have in the one thing? Like an 11-shaped building, 11 people on Flight 11. I mean, come on, you know, the symbolism is just off the charts with this event.
Right. And there's a lot of dark occult symbolism built into it as well, and particularly the works of Aleister Crowley. A lot of the numerology, you know, the 9s and the 11s are everywhere, as you said, and there were important numbers in the teachings of Crowley and his various mystery school, traditions. So it really seems that this was a massive occult ritual, as well as all the geopolitical stuff that it paved the way to bring in. It was also a massive kind of energy harvesting event, an exchange of energy from the viewing public to the event itself, and there's a sense in which it was empowered by that large number of people all giving their attention and their energy to it, albeit unwittingly.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you could feel it. It was palpable on the day, you know. There were huge energy spikes that day, and you think the amount of people that were watching that, the entire world was watching that event virtually. I mean, there wouldn't have been too many people that weren't watching that event. If you weren't watching that event, you probably didn't have a television set. That'd be the only reason you weren't watching it. So, yeah, it was a huge, huge energy harvest. It ushered in all sorts of stuff, and there was incredible occult symbolism with it. I mean, the 9/11, this comes from the Knights Templar, and of course, you know, the 9 secular knights became set forth the Knights Templar back in like 1111 AD or 11 AD or something like that. It all ties into Knights Templar, the 9/11 thing. But yes, it was a huge, huge energy harvest. And you imagine the amount of energy they got, the amount of energy they harvested. And sometimes I wonder where it goes, this energy. I mean, what is bringing all this in and what is it used for? I mean, it's an incredible.
Where does it go?
Where does it go? I almost feel like our intention, our energies, It's almost feels like it's being harvested, you know, these sorts of things. I mean, this is another field to get into. We start getting into dark fields and occult stuff and esoteric stuff and archons and all sorts of things. But it feels like our intention is being harvested. That moment when we have that aha moment, when we think we've got something, that feeling that we get, it's just there's something that's I don't know. It's a weird thing. This is something that I'm looking into as well. I suppose we're getting into another off-topic sort of a thing, going into a tangent. But energy is a huge part of this, and everything they do is about harvesting our energy. And the question is, where does it go? What do they do with it? How do they use it? What is really going on here? You know, I think there's so much more going on here than what we're aware of.
Yeah.
But 9/11 is. It's a key. It's a catalyst. It's an event that can be used to wake up so many people to the fact that there is something terribly wrong, and it will never be old news. And it's important that people do look at it and you know, and talk about it, and talk about it with their friends. Just ask questions around the kitchen table. Just get people thinking about this, because the way it relates to our life now, it relates to everything that's happening in our societies right now. It really does. All the laws they're bringing in, the wars that we're fighting, the people that are dying, everything relates back to this event. So, yeah,
I don't know what you can say to somebody that still clings to the official narrative, you know, because these people are still out there. I don't know what 15 years later you can still say to somebody to make them wake up to the truth of the matter and see that things can't possibly have happened the way the BBC told us it did, or CNN or whatever. I mean, you know, when you've spent some time analysing the official story, it's so full of holes that it's just difficult to comprehend how anyone can still fall for it. So it just leads you to wonder whether there are people in the world who are going to spend a lifetime in ignorance of truth. And maybe they've made that decision for themselves before they got here in spirit, soul form, you know. But it just seems there's nothing you can do to these people. There's no amount of evidence you can place in front of them to make them see what should be so blatantly obvious. You know, how do you get through to these people? Or can you not? You know, are there certain people who you just have to leave them to it and conclude that it's pointless trying to wake them up?
Well, a lot of people are just like void portals, and they don't care. They'll go wherever the general consensus belief is, and it still doesn't make any difference to their lives. They'll be telling you that it's all rubbish, what you're saying about 9/11 one week, and then they'll tell you, oh yeah, we all know it was staged the next week. But it hasn't changed their lives at all. They're just still going along, doing what they're doing, going through the motions. Oh yeah, yes, we all know that was staged. It just, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't affect them. They'll just go with whatever the public consensus is. With these people, when in the conversations you have around them, you just act like it's common knowledge that 9/11 was staged, and you refer to it that way. And then they'll start doing the same thing because they'll just go with the general consensus. That's just the way they are. A lot of people will never ever wake up, and when they do wake up, they still won't be awake. They'll just go with a general consensus, and that's all good. That's just what they do. You've got to understand that there's a certain amount of people here that are kind of like, they're like the filler material you put in a pie, or the filler material you put in a cake. They're like corn flour, or you know, something like that, quinoa. You know, they're just something to rice. You know, something to bolster up the meal. You know, bolster up the consciousness. But they're kind of just void. They're just sort of wandering through, and nothing ever really makes a difference to them. And that's okay. It's okay for people to be like that, and there's a lot of people that are like that. But that's how you get to them. You just make it the general consensus when you're around them, and then they will just turn into that without even knowing that they did.
But for as long as there's people like that in the world that will just go with these official narratives and not question things, you know, this is exactly the kind of response that the dark controllers rely on. They want a meek, passive general public that don't take any interest in trying to figure out what's really going on, and even if they do, don't take any kind of action against it. It's exactly the dynamic they rely on, and which ensures the continuation of this human slavery that we've got. And it can be very frustrating for those of us that have figured these things out and do want to take a stand against it, to realise that we don't have these people on board with us, and that they're collectively helping to hold humanity back. You know, it's a very frustrating situation.
It is. It can be very frustrating. But you've got to just realise that it's there. It's there. It's always going to be there. They know it's there. That's why voting works. You know, they play on it. So you just got to realise that this is the way it is. You're not going to wake everybody up. There's going to be a lot of the population that are just going to go with the general flow. And that's just the way it is. And it is incredibly frustrating, but that's just the way it is. And knowing that, though, it's kind of comforting that you realise that, okay, you're like swimming through this sea of porridge. But you know, there are certain bits of oats there that aren't too soggy yet, that you can sort of coalesce into a little island somewhere in the middle. So you just got to realise that this is what you're dealing with. And it kind of, to me, I mean, I don't get quite so frustrated because I know I'm swimming through a sea of porridge. It's okay. I know the porridge is there, and that's fine with me. It's how bright I can shine, and how much I can be a thorn in the side of the system that's going to make a difference. Because once that happens, then people will rally. You know, the general consensus, a lot of it will go that way. Half of the void portals will kind of lean in that direction. So it's okay. I mean, it's okay. That's just what human consciousness is. It can be incredibly frustrating, and it has been for me over the years. But over the years, I've just kind of learned to deal with it and accept that it's there. And that we still can get through this. So it can be frustrating, but it can be comforting, because you know that you're not just dealing with people who won't wake up. You're just dealing with people who can't. It's just a porridge, you know. So it's okay.
Well, it's an interesting point about people that just lean with the general consensus of things. So if you can make truth-seeking hip and trendy and cool, there's going to be a lot of people that will gravitate towards it just because it's the cool and trendy thing to be into. And although that's a bit empty and vacuous in itself, if they're not going to do anything about it, at least it's a way of, you know, the word getting spread and people being turned on to these alternative takes on things, and at least giving them the opportunity to get involved in some kind of active way. Just an interesting thing to reflect on. But, you know, I've made the point before that it seems to me that somewhere in an alternative reality, there's a parallel universe which is exactly the same as this one, except that in that version, 9/11 went down and the human population saw what had happened, saw through the official story, realised what the end game was, and rose up and took their power back. But not in this one. It seems that, you know, we're so close to there being a version of reality where that event would have been the last straw and would have shaken people out of their slumber, but it hasn't quite happened that way.
Well, it hasn't quite, but I think it's getting to a point now where, you know, so many people are seeing that, you know, what's going on. I mean, what is this? This is a mess. You know, when you know, the century turned, you know, the millennium turned back there in the year 2000, we thought this was going to be a great millennium of peace. And, you know, within 1 year, that peace was shattered, and it's been the most horrendous time ever. And there was a real hope and a real sense of something and a new purpose that could have happened back then in the year 2000. And I don't think people are going to take it too much longer, Mark. I really don't. I think people can see now. They can see just how corrupt it is. They can see that we're heading for World War III. They can see that the powers that believe they be are doing everything they can to try to control us. I mean, the only way they're going to do it will be another major event, which I wouldn't be surprised happens even this year or next year. I really feel that there is going to be a huge catalytic event, which is going to be, it's going to dwarf 9/11. Whatever they do, they're going to do something. But I don't know that they'll even pull that off. When it happens, I don't know if people will buy it. Of course, it doesn't matter if people buy it, though, does it? Because they'll just send the goon squad out and the police state will come online and they'll just do what they want anyway. So, you know, it's a concern.
But it's still early days, I guess, in many ways. 15 years is not that long a time in the overall field of human history. And, you know, 9/11, I feel, has paved the way for people to ask all kinds of questions about the official version of everything that we've been fed. So you've got people now questioning the official narrative of the Jewish Holocaust and the figure of 6 million and all these details of what may or may not have happened at Auschwitz and all of that. So here we are revisiting that subject 60 years later. You've got people examining the Kennedy assassination 50 years later and asking questions about it and dredging the whole thing up, and, you know, what happened at Pearl Harbor and all of this, and going back even further, you know, people asking questions about the Titanic and all sorts. So 15 years is not that long, really, and who knows 50 years after the event where we'll be in terms of will anyone in the world swallow the official version then? You know, it's worth reflecting on.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that 9/11 is what's caused a lot of people to go back and revisit those older conspiracies and those older things that have happened because they want to know. It's kind of woken them up that, hang on, this may have been going on for a lot longer.
If they can lie about this, what else have they been lying about?
Exactly. So it's causing people to go back and revisit those things. And a lot of people are asking questions. I don't think in 50 years from now we'll either be locked down into a complete police state and this world will be half strip mined the way it is, or we'll be free. And I don't think that they're going to get away with this. I really don't. I think there's too much surfacing now. And there's a real, I mean, the whole disturbance in the independent media at the moment, there's a real bubbling to the surface of energy, and there's a real bubbling to the surface and shifting of energies, and there's just a separation. There's the wheat is being separated from the chaff. There's a clean out happening. We're cleaning house. And I think we're going to come to a very, very bright light after this point. I think that we're going to be really, really pushing forward ourselves, knowing that we have to do it ourselves on the ground. I think there's going to be a huge motivational change in people soon, and we're going to see a huge push forward from the people. I don't think they're going to get away with it, Mark. I really don't. I think that too many people are awake now, and too many people have just had enough and realise that this is my life, and I'm going to die one day anyway, so I'm going to make a stand now. Yeah. Because I prefer to live on my feet than die on my knees. Yeah. And a lot of people are realising that. And I think a lot of people in the system, the police and lower-level politicians, I think a lot of these people are going to break ranks. And I think that we're at a real turning point now.
Yeah, because these guys are the gatekeepers, and they're the ones that are bringing into physical manifestation the system of slavery that we've got. So without these foot soldiers taking orders and just blindly implementing them, then the control system has no strength.
Exactly. It's the order followers that are the problem. And really, the order followers, once they see the entire of society standing up, I mean, these guys aren't going to go against their mothers and their brothers and their sisters and their family. They're going to say, well, why are we here oppressing all of our families and our societies on behalf of these few people that are standing behind us? Perhaps we should turn around and ask them what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's going to come to. I really do.
Yeah, getting these foot soldiers on side seems to be the key to the whole process, really, because there's so many ways in which they're the last line of defence between us and them, So for us to get them on the side of humanity, because, these are individuals with families, they've got children, they're just like us in that sense, and they needn't think that they're going to get any kind of special treatment from those that employ them when the shit goes down. They're just collateral, and they're just foot soldiers, and they're disposable like the rest of us, so they need be under no illusion about that. But a question that I put to Ian last week, which I'll put to you as well, is, as we've said, 9/11 has caused a whole bunch of people to wake up to the truth of what's going on in this reality who might not have done otherwise. Is that a process that you think would have been foreseen by the perpetrators? And would they just have considered that collateral damage? Would they have just thought, well, we're going to pull this thing off, it will wake a few people up, but we just have to live with that? Or do you think it's more what you mentioned in the first part of this interview, which was it's been a way of them identifying those people that see through the bullshit and are awake and, gathering data on where these people are in the world? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think that they realised there was going to be collateral damage, but then they realised the opportunity in knowing where all these people are. I think it's been a play. I really do. It was two-staged. It was too obvious. And I think it's going to depend now on how we play this. We can't back down. We can't show fear in the face of this. We really can't. We've got to stand our ground and speak our truth and stand up for this. We really do, and realise that they've had tabs on us all along anyway. But I think it's a double-edged sword, like I said before. It has been a catalytic event. It has caused a lot of wakefulness. It has brought a lot of people together, but it's also given the government the means to know where all these people are, and to see who the sheep are, who the awake ones are, and to be able to get in and infiltrate and undermine. I mean, we're seeing a huge infiltration and undermining of the resistance and the independent media and all this sort of stuff. So we know that there are operators in there, and I think it's been a double-edged sword. I think it works both ways. It's been a bit of a thorn in the side for them, but it's really given them tabs on people. But again, I think they underestimated the power of the human spirit. I really do. I don't think they expected people to rise the way they have and stand the way they are. I think they expected people to fold a little easier and to respect authority a little bit more and to be a little bit more in fear. And I don't think that they expected the tenacity and the ferocity of the response that they're getting.
Or maybe it was a kind of acid test to just figure out where humanity is and how readily they would fall for an event like this. And maybe it has given them a shock, as you say, in terms of the reaction that it's brought about. Because in many ways, 9/11 has been the blueprint to other things that they've rolled out. In London, we have the 7/7 bombings, and there was the Madrid bombings, there was the nightclub thing in Bali, and then all these lower-level false flag things, all these fake shootings, and the Lee Rigby event, the Joe Cox event. It seems 9/11 was the template for all of these other events which followed. And it was in many ways, it was a testing ground to see what can we get away with and what will the reaction be.
Oh yeah, very much, to see how people are going to react for it and to see how big they can get. How big can the lie be? How much can we get away with?
How audacious can they be?
Yeah, let's make it a spectacle. And it was a Hollywood spectacle. It was like watching an action movie, wasn't it? The whole thing, everything was there, had all the elements of a great action movie. So,
and I've often said, if a movie had come out in the years before 2001 and the plot line was these Arab hijackers get these planes and fly them into the World Trade Center towers and the Pentagon, people would have come out of those movie theatres and said, well, it was all right, but the plot was a bit far-fetched. I mean, come on now. and yet that's exactly what we're told happened on the goddamn news.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It really is. But it was such a theatrical event, and it was obviously so staged. I mean, like on the day, I knew that it was staged. On the day when the planes hit, I thought America was under attack. I thought, what's this? And like what Bush said, I thought that must be a really bad pilot. I mean, sure, I thought, wow, how the hell does a plane hit the World Trade Center? I mean, what is this? This has got to be done deliberately. There's no way a plane's going to hit the World Trade Center. Bad pilot or what the hell's going on? And then when the second plane hit, you go, this is an attack. This is an event. This is a staged event. What's going on? Is America under attack? I mean, who's doing this? Is this hijackers? You know, you got all these thoughts going on. But then when the building came down, I'm like, oh my God, this is it. This is the event, you know. You can just see when the building came down, it just couldn't happen that day.
You mean Building 7, yeah?
No, the first tower.
The tower,
when the first tower came down, it collapsed in 10 seconds. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, no.
Right.
No. That's just what I'm thinking. That's all I could say was no. About 100 times in my head. No. You know? And I just went, well, hang on, this is it. And then when the other one came down, I'm like, oh, this is it. They've done that. This is controlled demolition right there. I said, this is the event. This is the one. And so it was a huge catalytic event, and a lot of people saw it on the day. A lot of people didn't, like you say, a lot of people didn't, but it was a huge life-changing event. So, you know, and we can still deal with it, and we can expose it, and we can bring freedom to this society through exposing this event. And like I said earlier, it will never, ever be old news. People who say, oh, we don't need to talk about this now, it's old news. No. It'll never be old news. So everything we're doing today in our society today hinges on this event. So it's really good even that you're doing this show just as an anniversary thing, just to sort of remind people that this is what started it, and this is why we're here, and this is why it's so important. Because if they're prepared to do this, I mean, just killed 2,997 people one morning to write some legislation and go and attack some countries. And that's what they're prepared to do, folks. What's the next one going to be if we let them continue?
Well, I'm doing this show now because I'm conscious of the fact that in a few days we're going to have the mainstream media just parroting the official version all over again and reinforcing this war on terror and the evil Muslims did it and all this bullshit. You know, people are going to be bombarded with this all over again like they are every year. So I just wanted to put a counter version of events out there into the morphogenic field, you know, and it's interesting to reflect on where we'll be in 5 years, the 20th anniversary. Maybe we'll be having a different kind of conversation, you know, maybe in the course of the next 5 years. Who knows what other stunts they're going to pull? Who knows where humanity's collective consciousness is going to be in 5 years? You know, it's anybody's guess, really.
Yeah, well, you know, talking about the terrible Muslims that do all these things, you know, I'd like people, if they haven't looked at the figures, you know, since 9/11 happened, Western governments have gone out and killed 4 million Muslims. 4 million. That's a lot of people.
I mean, people think of the body count from that event, 3,000 people, whatever it is, but the body count that those events led to is into the millions, as you say, factoring in all these other countries that it's affected.
4 million Muslims that have been killed on the back of an event that they had absolutely nothing to do with. 9/11 was staged by elements within the American and Israeli governments. That's provable, absolutely provable. If there was a court case and it actually went to trial, there is enough evidence to convict certain elements within the American and Israeli governments for this crime, and probably nobody else. You know, probably elements in the private sector as well, but there are no other governments you would find involved in this. Maybe Pakistan, you know, but you won't find any Arab governments that are involved in this. And we've gone and killed 4 million Muslims in order to, what, protect ourselves from terrorists? Are you kidding me? Are you serious? I mean, anybody who buys this has got rocks in their head the size of France. Honestly, they really have. It's just absurd that anybody cannot see through this official story, and anybody could support this incredibly fake war of terror, because that's what it is. It's a war of terror. And this event has been used to go out and destroy the world and lock our own societies down to a police state because we're allowing our system to be run by criminals because we don't call it. And I think we should. We've got to call it. We've got to stand up to these people, folks. Stand up to these people who are taking your rights away, who are enslaving you, who dare to kill 3,000 people one morning and then go out and kill 4 million others as a response. I mean, think about what your governments are doing, folks, and think about it and consider that these are just people, the same as you. These guys that wear expensive suits, and they're going out and they're murdering millions upon millions of people all around the world because we're letting them. And we pay them our protection money. We pay them taxes and all this stuff. You know, I'll pay you your taxes and I'll do the right thing, and you'll use that money to go and murder people overseas. And I'm okay with you doing that as long as you don't come and kill me. So we're paying our governments to go and murder other people so they don't come and hurt us. This is protection money. It's a protection racket. That's all government is. We don't need these people. They're criminals, and we need to call them out.
And what's incredible to me is there's architects of these plans. So there would have been a bunch of individuals that sat around and devised all the fine detail of what happened on 9/11 and all these other things we've had. So, you know, we've had all these events in the United States designed to support taking away the guns from the people, from the general public. And so we've had staged shootings, but they always differ in detail. You know, it'll be a politician in the street, it'll be some kid that goes on the rampage in a school, and then it'll be a shopping centre, you know. So they vary the detail in each case. And it's just amazing to me that there are people that will sit around and say, okay, we've done the shooting in a school, so we've got to do something different this time. Or we had the soldier that was hacked to pieces in the street, so when it comes to this politician, we've got to do it differently. We've got to have the guy stabbing her and, you know, going crazy. And, you know, they vary the fine detail. And the fact that there are people that will do this for a paycheck and they have no conscience that kicks in and says, what are you doing? You know, you can't be doing this. It's just incredible to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, they look at people like cattle, and it all makes perfect sense to them. It's just a means of organising the flock. It's just a means of organising things, and it's just collateral damage, and they don't really care. It's just numbers on a screen to them. The people don't matter. You know, it's just, you know, how we do things. It's the way they're restructuring Europe. You know,
how can humanity be that degraded unless we're talking about mind control or, you know, severe psychopathy?
Mind control, severe psychopathy, or perhaps a race of people who believe that they are better than all the other people and that they're the only true humans and that all the rest are just cattle. Perhaps someone who believes that we're all goyim.
Yeah. But it is interesting to reflect on whether they pull off another really audacious plan like 9/11, which you referenced earlier. You know, if they've got something big planned, what is the effect of that going to be on the general public now that we've had so many of these lower level ones? And, you know, the fact that every time one of these hoax events goes off, people are on it straight away. They're posting YouTube videos, they're sharing information, people are talking about it to their friends and family. If they tried something really big and tried to get really cute, I just wonder whether they'd be able to get away with it to the degree that they did with 9/11, or whether that would be the final nail in the coffin for them and people would just see it for what it is and say, well, this just smacks of being a contrived event.
Yeah, I think people will. I think that's what they're in fear of. I think people have not backed down the way they thought. We have not been cowed. Our voices have just gotten stronger. Whenever they try to squash me, I just scream louder. And a lot of people are like that.
Is there any note you want to end on? Anything you want to add to what we've said already?
Look, no, I think we're pretty well covered. I'd really want to see people wake up, and I want to see people maintain their strength and realise that when this new event does come, we've been waiting for it, we've been planning for it, and there's opportunity in all this. There's opportunity for you to call it out, and all of this anyway, it's an opportunity for you to find your strength. That's what all of these challenges in life are for that moment when you stand up and just call it and stand in your power and shine your light. That's what this is for. So you can do it, everybody can do it, and it's coming. And this challenge is coming, but you can get through it, and you're going to come through it on the other side in a much, much better state. So do stand up and shine your light, folks.
All right, we'll leave it there, brother.
Thank you, Mark. Pleasure to come on.
This is just a ride.
I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up good vibrations. I'm picking up